Hello, and welcome to Four Mothers of Women's Spirituality Online Resource Center. Today, I'm your hostess. My name is Ruth Barrett, and today I'm interviewing Vajra, who is the curator of the Resource Center. And I will be giving more information about her in just a moment, but I wanted to first introduce this project to you for some of you who may be unfamiliar. Women's spirituality emerged as a major component of second wave feminism in the women's spirituality movement of the 70s and 80s. But many people today do not know of the courageous radical meaning to the root, women, the foremothers of women's spirituality, who developed authentic spiritual experiences and practices beyond the boundaries of patriarchal religion. But many people today do not even know about them, which is why this project is so important. These feminists followed their passion, their convictions, and built upon a growing body of scholarly historical knowledge, and some brought forth through intact indigenous wisdom to connect us back to the nature and female-honoring spirituality that preceded the past 6,000 to 7,000 years of patriarchal father gods. The foremothers, along with many other feminists, pioneered a diverse spiritual orientation based in respect, reverence, and relationship with all. The foremothers of that emergence are not only hysterically
important. Maybe we are.
Okay, but you know, hyster means womb, okay? So
right.
Maybe it is relevant.
Yeah.
Historically relevant. Where am I? Maybe, can you edit that?
Yeah, I love it. Let's keep it in. We're not only historically relevant, okay, but we're doing our work today, aren't we? We're still doing it.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to begin that again. The foremothers of that emergence are not only historically significant, but many are actively continuing and evolving their vital work today. That is why this resource center was created, to provide a historical overview via personal testimonies and recollections of the formative first 2 decades of the women's spirituality movement, and to learn about the presence of this ongoing work today. We invite you to meet these women, now in the form of taped interviews with additional interviews and resources to be expanded as time goes on. So our interview with Vajra is taking place in 2018. And before I welcome Vajra, I want to read a short biography of your work. Vajra is the leading exponent of women's womb awakening in feminist spirituality. Inspired by her work with women's subtle body knowing since the mid-1980s, she originated the devotional moving meditation, the tantric dance of feminine power. This is the womb-sourced moving meditation practice of her mystery school and priestess lineage, Women Mysteries of the Ancient Future Sisterhood. Vajra is author of From a Hidden Stream, The Natural Spiritual Authority of Woman, that's from 2010, and co-author of The Woman's Collective. Her essays are published in numerous anthologies, including Four Mothers of the Women's Spirituality Movement, that's 2015, Voices of the Sacred Feminine, that's 2014, and Daughters of the Goddess, from 2000, and Female Erasure, 2016. Vajra's movement work has been the subject of scholarly papers presented at national conferences on religion. Reverend Vajra is an ordained Dianic priestess of women's mysteries since 1992, with ministerial credentials through Temple of Diana, Inc. She is an accomplished actress, appearing in numerous plays, film, TV, movies, and an extensive background in dance, vocal studies, and a BA and 2 years graduate work in theater arts. So I'm very, very happy to welcome Vajra to this amazing project. And we are going to talk about your work today and how it evolved to this point and how it relates to women's spirituality. And before we get into that, the first question that I actually want to ask you is, because you are the curator of this incredible project, of this resource center, why did you feel it was important to do this project? Why was it important to you?
Yeah. In conjunction with that answer, Ruth, I want to say and tell everyone, because it has a lot to do with lineage, the broken lineage of woman, and restoring that broken lineage. And part of that is acknowledging our teachers. And I want everyone to know that you are my feminist spirituality teacher from the early 90s. And you are the one who ordained me through the organization, of course. And I am so grateful for your teachings and the space that you hold for women's sacred bodies and sacred mysteries. You are an incredible center holder and ritualist, and have been around for, what is it, 40 years now?
Yes. 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 Yeah. I'm going. I'm still standing.
Yes, you are. And I'm grateful to be in your anthology, Female Erasure, 2016. And so I want to acknowledge that too, and the work that you did in that. It's extremely important. We'll probably get into that later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to say something to you, Vajra, is that, you know, when you're able to be in a position to really hold women to find their place and to find their path of service, there's nothing more satisfying than that for me. And the fact that you have taken your priestess path and made something so incredibly powerful and unique with it, I can't be more proud to know you and to have been a part of making that path perhaps a bit easier for you, because this path, as you know, is not easy, and especially not in these times. So I'm very thankful to you and grateful that you stand as powerfully as you do in the work that you do in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, what we're talking about, Ruth, is how we weave together as women, our work. You know, I'm going to get to the answer to the question here in a minute, the first question, but it has to do with how our work weaves together, how we affect each other. And as people look at this series, if they look at several of the interviews, they'll see that this happens. This is the way of women. This is the way of creativity. We need each other. It's the way of humanity, really. But women especially, this is how we work. We cross-pollinate, and we hold things together, and we create pathways. Yes. So the reason I felt that this project is so important, first of all, I want to say it was inspired, here we go, about the cross-pollination and affecting each other. It was inspired by the anthology that Miriam Robbins Dexter and Vicki Noble edited, called Four Mothers of the Women's Spirituality Movement, Elders and Visionaries, of which you also have an essay, and many of the women in this project do, not all, but some. And this is inspired from that project, because I thought, this is so important. It was so inspiring to see that anthology. And I thought, what if we actually saw the women speaking about their work? There's something that's transmitted through the voice, the body, through the medium of film, that is different than, goes beyond the page, the written word. They each have their own value. And also there could be more women involved, because you're limited in a book, because the publisher says you only have so many words, and that's all you can do. So it's an expansion of that inspiration from that anthology. And from this, if we look at women's history, we see that the lineage is broken again and again and again. I was just thinking this morning how there was an army of 10,000 Chinese women, I don't remember what century, but in resistance to patriarchy. 10,000, an army of 10,000 Chinese women. And maybe the 1800s or something, I don't know, but I wasn't planning on sharing that, so I don't have the specifics. But who knows about that? Who knows about that? Right. You know, the resistance to patriarchy has been going on since it began. And the whole foundation of patriarchy is to separate us, separate humanity from earth, separate us from the animals, separate woman from woman, being in the Moon Lodge, separate woman from her original position as the natural spiritual authority, leading humanity, being the social leaders, the political leaders. Before there were, politics were different in tribal times. All of that, being the spiritual leader, separating women from our own bodies, which is what you and I focus on a lot, the women's mysteries, really knowing who we are and being connected to our bodies, and separating us from the sisterhood. So that broken lineage, and what really has come home to me more and more is that lineage is broken just since the 60s, 70s, and 80s in terms of the women's spirituality movement emerging. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I go to the Goddess Temple of Orange County down in Orange County that our friend Ava Park, founded and has run for like 13 years, I think it is now. Some of those women that come there, they've never heard of Zephuta Best, who was one of your major teachers. They've never heard of the women that are in this series. And what a broken lineage it is. We've got to restore it.
Yes. It's erasure in our own time. That's the amazing thing about what's been happening. We're actually watching. It's like watching something disappear right in front of you. And there are reasons for that. And a lot of it has to do with changes in socially around what is okay to talk about and what is not. It is, I think it's to our detriment and our possible demise that we erase the powerful and important messages and people who brought those messages. But it is happening right before our very eyes. And I don't know, I have my own ideas about where that's going. And this is why a project like this is so important, to bring those voices of the women that are still living, because many of our peers and and my elders are gone. Women who would have been a part of this project,
yeah.
And women who are, they've left already, and so it's, and you can't bring them back. You can try to keep their work alive, however. And so we are, being part of this project is very, very important for that reason.
And so well said. And so the women that are involved in it are just thrilled to be really eager to contribute, because they feel it too. And
Right.
so we're trying to inspire women to know who we are and to stay connected and to restore that broken lineage. And the other thing about this is that I thought it would take away the mystique of, well, she is the great teacher, and it was easy for her. No, it's not easy. We know how difficult it is, how much, how much we need each other, how we're all just human, and some of us bring through great things that are inspiring, but we need to remember that we're all capable of that. And so through the humanness of us. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's really important, because sometimes the models in patriarchy are about everyone's like below, and this teacher is like somehow in this infallible non-human person who hasn't had the struggles. And we know, that's just ridiculous and not true. But for some reason that it's that story keeps returning. And we have, when you bring especially messages and creativity that is not is apart from the dominant culture, and you have to fight to even bring it out. You have to first have it come, the creativity or the messages come to you, and then who's going to listen? And so it's, sometimes, I think that anyone who's courageous is put on a pedestal for some. And it's not about a pedestal at all. It's really just about someone has to initiate something. And to initiate means to begin. Someone has to take that first step out, and then it makes it easier for the rest of us. And I really, that model to me is not about a hierarchy of power over. It's really about someone steps out first, and then we either choose to go and find out about that path or not.
You are
And
reminding me of what I was looking at today, and somehow I wanted to include it, and I didn't know why, but it was this. It was about, and it goes right in with this initiating it, with stepping forward. Back in my college days, I was feeling kind of despondent. In the 70s, I was feeling quite despondent, and I was walking through the college library, and this book fell out right in front of me and landed on the floor out of nowhere. It just fell off the shelf. And I picked it up. It was Emerson's Essays, which I had loved when I was 14, before I split off and had a traumatic experience in a relationship with a man, a boyfriend much older than me. And I just kind of got messed up since then. There was a lot. That's a whole other story, but one that most of us, can identify with to some degree. And I had loved Emerson, and I hadn't read. So I had picked up the book and I flipped it open to the essay Self-Reliance, which was my favorite essay.
Yeah.
And there was that statement where he says, in every work of genius, there is, you recognize your own thoughts coming back to you in a sort of alienated majesty. And he also says in there, he says, if you don't trust your own thoughts, you'll be forced to hear them from a stranger and kind of take them with shame, recognize your own thoughts. So this whole thing of trusting yourself, as you've had to do, as I've had to do, I've said, how difficult it was. When I was doing my work, I felt like I was climbing up a cliff by my fingernails.
Yes.
So we need to appreciate that. But that's true for everybody. And then you hear these myths about these great, Tibetan Buddhist teachers who were born on a lake on top of a lotus. Well, come on, and we know what the lotus is. The lotus was originally the lotus goddess, and it's your vulva. So let's just get rid of all that.
Right. Hiding in plain sight as it is. Yeah, but that is the role. But you're talking about the role of the pioneer. And, to be involved in the women's spirituality movement from that time, we were pioneering something. And as I often reflect upon, is that when you are making a movement, you don't know you're making a movement. When you find it's only years later in retrospect that you look back and you go, wow, there were these new ideas that came into human consciousness at this time, and many people were awakened by those ideas, and that's what makes a movement begin to happen. But it's not apparent at the time. So that piece in Emerson that you read about isolation, or feeling, we're often feeling like we're crazy, and who else is thinking these thoughts? And that's why making a movement, or it becoming a movement, is so affirming, because it wouldn't if it wasn't needed. If we didn't need to focus on these things. And the emergence of women's spirituality movement, at the timing, had to do so much with the social movements that were occurring, and the environmental movement, and how were we going to save our Mother Earth, and feminism that was really embarking again in its cycle. So so I actually want to ask you then the question about what brought you to the path of women's spirituality. How did you find your way? Because we're talking about how we have a movement now to come into, but there wasn't. So how did you find your way? What was your path to goddess spirituality?
Yeah, well, I came in rather late in the time frame of these first 2 decades, into the mid 80s. So there was a great deal, there was an explosion in the 70s of scholarly research and publishing. So I had the benefit of that, but I didn't discover it until I discovered body movement, moving meditation. It all happened at the same time for me. In the mid 80s. I studied with a woman who was experimenting with how women could hold more energy in their bodies and move in meditation, spontaneous meditation, and let the energy build up. And it was connected, for her, it was connected to the vagina and your sexual feelings. And so that started, she called it feminine knowledge. And she read papers from her male shaman guide, who wrote papers about feminine knowledge, serpents and Kali, the goddess, and various subjects like that, animal powers. And then overlapping that, I studied Continuum, which is the premier, of the genre of internal movement, as it's called, which is the subtle energies of the body, communing with the subtle energies of the body. Now, the dance work experimentation that I did with Gina Reno was standing, and the Continuum was lying down, very much like in a dream state. And it's in that I studied with Susan Harper, who was the major partner with Emily Conrad Dowd, who founded Continuum. And with these seeds of this body knowing, of this direct body experience, were absolutely foundational to my work. From Susan in Continuum, I learned really what the subtle energies feel like. And at the same time, I was reading The Great Cosmic Mother by Barbara Moore and Monica Sajou, that marvelous, huge tome about women's religion, pre-patriarchal religion. And so the information about the goddess was starting to come to me. And I also read Gynecology, which spun my head around 180 degrees. Mary Daly's Gynecology. Oh boy. And that's a major powder cake for anyone. But what was happening in the Continuum classes was I started to have these spontaneous experiences of goddess energies. So I could see that my studies about the goddess and getting that, what I call the paradigm busting, information about the goddess, was coming into my experiences with the body, and I was having these spontaneous experiences where I would go, oh, this is Yamaya. I could feel it. And I thought, well, I want to do more of this. But there was no place to go. And so I started calling together circles. Actually, before that, I was doing some moon circles with my roommates. I was experimenting, learning how to do ritual just by doing it. But then I read, okay, I want to experience more of this direct feeling of these energies when it imprints on you, nothing can take it away. You've had a direct experience. And I wanted to, so I called circles of women together. And back in those days, no internet, right? So I got a hold of an email list from someone, and I started building the roster of women I could phone, and I would make like 60 phone calls, and about 20 women would come to a circle. And I wrote, I went just voracious, Ruth. I was just voracious. I took every book I could find and take little pieces of this and that, and about this goddess and that goddess, and put it together. I do about 20 hours of research, and then I take about 5 hours to write a journey. And I did about 11 of these goddess circles, I called them, goddess journeys. And in those journeys, I gave the information about the goddess in a lie-down meditation sort of thing where you could visualize it. And it had information, and someone like Athena, she'd appear originally as the Greek goddess, right? Because that's what people think she was. But then at some point she'd peel off her helmet and her spear and her Greek garb and get down to the Amazonian tunic. And she'd have black skin. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Because she's originally from Libya. We know that. And the Greeks stole her. So I would give journeys like that, and then I'd give a part in the journey where the women could ask for wisdom from that goddess or ask a question and establish a direct relationship. And then we would go in, we'd sit up and we'd take a break, and then we come into circle and we do a dance circle where the energy, and what I want to acknowledge Ruth Gould Goodman for this, because she's a masteress, Ruth Gould Goodman, and I had learned from her how to do a really effective spontaneous dance circle where a woman will come into the center, and we're sitting around witnessing, and you start with stillness and silence. And that way you get rid of the agenda of, entertaining or having to look good, or, you just have to go into that place of trust, the stillness and silence. And then whatever sound or movement emerged, the women would then, go with it, and we'd have instruments, drums and rattles and bells and rattles, and we would follow her energy, and it would have this, it would grow into something and then finally come to an end. And that was that woman's body knowing. It wasn't the subtle energies. Yeah, it wasn't the subtle energies necessarily, but it was body knowing impulse. It was spontaneous movement. And I did about 11 of those. And here's the interesting thing. I wrote them while I was bleeding. I have some kind of a natural rhythm. 11 out of I think there are 13 journeys. 11 out of 13 were written while I was bleeding. I didn't intend that, but that's just how it happened. I was in some kind of a rhythm, and that was just magnificent to be in women's circles, to learn directly from the body, to learn from the other women. And that's when I first heard voices, like I could hear them in my inner ear, the voices, and that's with the ancient future sisterhood, the voices of tribal women, shamanic women, priestesses of the past, this from the other realms coming around, and they were participating with us. And I had the courage at one point to make the sound, that we talked about, trust yourself, Emerson's thing, and self-reliance and all of this and pioneering. I'm going to trust the sound. And I made the sound that I could hear, and pow, electricity around the circle, and everybody got into it, and it just jacked it up a whole nother frequency, so it was interdimensional.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
It sounds like you had the movement was a port, what I would call a portal, to connect to, it's like through the mitochondrial DNA, or activating the mitochondrial DNA, to connect with not only maybe one's personal ancestors that, back through time. Now I understand the ancient future sisterhood implications of the name, and also the revelation about our interconnections as women through this term body knowing that you talk about. And I'm wondering if you can maybe describe a little bit more what that word means. If someone said, what does body knowing mean?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. The body speaks through what? Through sound, feelings, physical feelings, emotions, which are linked to physical feelings, shape, and movement. This is the language of the body. And I've learned that the body does not lie, ever. It can't lie. It doesn't lie. So it's a great guide. It knows. The body knows. It has knowledge. Yes. And it knows. For instance, you walk into a room where there's been an argument or something, you kind of go, your hair stands, you go, oh, it feels creepy here, That's body knowing. Or you meet somebody and you feel sort of repelled. You don't know why. That's body knowing. Or you meet someone else and you feel such a draw to them, and that's body knowing. Now that draw could also be someone who's not people get sucked in all the time, especially women with gurus and that sort of thing. But that has to do with I would maintain that their body knowing would give them a warning flag that they don't listen to. So these are the cues that the body gives us all the time. And when we hear something that we just know is true, we get those goosebumps, right? We just get shivers over the body. That's another body knowing. And what I do...
One of the
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it's making me think about, considering how, you're talking after doing this for such a long time, you have a trust in that it's coming authentically from you. And I know that you must have to deal with this all the time in your work with women, the trauma that women have because of living in a patriarchal culture. We are estranged from our body knowing very purposefully. We're not supposed to. We're like, it's trained out of us to trust that, to trust authentic knowing and instead, believe these other things, or give your authority away to other people. And also trauma, or sexual trauma, the exploitation of women in through all the different media around, the influence of pornography on a woman's self-image, and all of that. And it sounds like you have to wait, be able to siphon through, cipher through, and that process is an amazing one. And it feels like it would be like peeling an onion,
Well,
over quite a period of time. What is your experience with that?
That is an incredible question and observation. And my experience with that is that it's not really like peeling an onion over a period of time. It is direct. You can go right to the core. And what we do is, and it's breathtaking how swiftly something can unravel if we sit with the body. So that's why it's good to have a guide who can hold the space with you. And you open it up for total non-judgment. A lot of times what I found, Ruth, is that women are afraid to go into, let's say, a feeling of anger. They don't have to act it out. I do body knowing sessions with people where, we just take an issue that's bothering them, and we ask where it lives in the body. Where is it? First we get all nice and quiet and connected. Where does it live in your body? And they always know it's somewhere. It's in the chest, or it's in the gut, or it's in the back of the neck. And we go there and we ask the question. And I got a lot of this kind of approach from what's called focusing, a technique called focusing, written by Gendler, I think is his name. I've kind of forgotten the name. And we ask the question, what needs to happen? Or, what are you? Let it describe itself. What's the image that goes with it? What's the feeling? And then what needs to happen? And the thing is that we go below the trauma. We go to the base, in Tantra, real Tantra, not Neo-Tantra. I'm talking about the real Tantric scriptures that are very, very old. It's, I lost my train of thought. That was funny. Anyway, we go below the trauma. Oh, yeah, in Tantra, and in the whole teaching of the goddess, she's always blissful. She's blissful. There's causeless joy available to us at all times. There is love permeating through the universe at all times. And we need to open the door, and we need to open to it and be receptive. And so what we do in the body knowing is we do just that. And we don't have to re-traumatize. It doesn't mean, it's not a panacea. You still have to work things out in your life, in relationships. But it's available right there. It's just this far away. It's just a breath away.
I think that's incredible. It's incredible to hear that, because from my work with women, and I know that we carry so much trauma just by living in the culture we do. So to be able to access that kind of knowing and that kind of pleasure that is from being alive, and revealing that to ourselves without having to go through the trauma to get there, it's phenomenal. And I just think that more women who would have access to that experience, because this is not a head thing, it's a full knowing, how revolutionary it is, and political. in terms of it's when we have an experience like that, we want the rest of our life to be like that.
Yes.
We know we are aware of the possibilities.
Well said. Really well said. And that's why we've been cut off from our bodies. You know, I mean, you're making me realize that this is like, yeah, cut women off from their bodies, because women especially have body knowing. You know, we used to gather in the moon lodges. We brought through wisdom for the people. We were listened to because our bodies were taking us down into that monthly shamanic descent, and the veil is thinner and between life and death, because we're going through a death process. And so, you know, it was important patriarchy couldn't exist unless you separated women from that knowledge, from that level of knowing. Yeah.
I think about historically, you know, when women became estranged, you know, from, you know, basically I'm talking about mind-body split. What we talk about, you really can't do that because, you know, we exist in our entirety with our head attached to the rest of us. But and I think about when women became property. When women become property historically, through conquest, through enslavement, through rights or practices that are about being owned, I think that then that estrangement can occur and does occur, so that there's no I anymore. If you are a thing possessed by another, you are not actually a person. You have no I, me, this is what I think, feel, all those things. So when I think about the work that you're doing and what it is and what it's been, and the potential for women to have this experience, the healing and of that legacy of ownership and estrangement and body mind split thing, it seems to me that the healing is present in that experience.
Yes. And I recently in reading, actually it's in my anthology, in my essay in the anthology, the Foremothers of Women's Spirituality, in reading Vajra by, she wrote The Beauty Myth, Naomi
Yeah.
we're having the same moment. Naomi Wolf.
Naomi Wolf, thank you. Yes.
Name of my husband. Okay.
Yes.
And when she describes, you know, when I was reading her book, I realized she was describing the womb, heart, third eye continuum that we experience in the tantric dance of feminine power, which I developed in my work. And this is the subtle energies moving and connecting through the body. And it is we could describe that internalization of that trauma and everything you've been describing that we're carrying as women in patriarchal culture, you know, as a disruption of those subtle energies and the connections between the womb, heart, and third eye, the inner vision, the wisdom vision. And so as we come into our bodies, and especially at that subtle level, and you know, the subtle energy, then we're healing the broken web, the broken lineage, literally, through the body, in the streams of energy and the neurons and all of that whole connection. It's very physical and literal.
Yes.
And I want to say, in terms of subtle energy, everybody's experienced it. When you experience an emotion, that is subtle energy. I want to give people sort of a touchstone. What do you mean, subtle energy, subtle sensations? We all experience it. But when we focus on it, we learn to focus on those subtle energies. Then they keep moving through the body, and they will unfold. There's like an inner dance, and we track it. And so that's like when I said, you know, we work on an issue in a body knowing session. What's the, you know, okay, what is it? Where is it located in your body? Okay, what wants to happen? And you begin to, by our attention, and our willingness to not put any judgment on it, it begins to move and shift and change, and it begins to reshape. And that changes everything in the body and in the psyche. And what I want to say too is that many times in working with women, if they're feeling rage or anger, like I said, we don't have to act it out, but they're afraid to even go there because they could kill somebody. Mm-hmm. You're so Sure. angry, you're so repressed, you could kill somebody. And so what we do is create a space where there's no judgment whatsoever. Anything is allowed here. There's no judgment. The meanest energy you could feel or impulse, it's okay. We're holding it in love. We're holding it in acceptance. And then it's so, then it can move. It can move, because we stuff our emotions down. And that's the thing we have to stop doing is stuffing them down. And when they move, then they bring through that natural flow is healing, and everything starts to reconnect.
I was going to ask you, what do you see as the relationship between political feminism and spiritual feminism's women's spirituality? And I do want you to answer that question. And of course, while I'm listening to you, I'm saying she's describing this connection because you're describing what actually makes it political feminism. It's a different approach because it's body knowing. And when women are able to actually to allow what is authentic to emerge freely, that and our authenticity in the dominant culture is considered a threat, because then we are not being ruled by gender stereotypes or what is the expected behavior of women. When it's authentic, we will be lionesses, we will be roaring, we will be outraged, we will be blissful, we will be joyful, we will be all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's really imperative to have it be an embodied experience, and because the power is there. And I can understand why women might be terrified to go into this place.
Yeah.
Because what will I find? And I've been, like you say, sometimes you allow the anger, when anger is present, to be there as just something that's passing through. And that is very different than a lot of the philosophies and the suppression and censorship of our feelings, especially for women. So allowing them to be expressed in the dance, as a free-flowing thing, is actually counter to how we're supposed to behave. So of course, I want to ask you officially what you see as the relationship between political feminism and spiritual feminism and women's spirituality.
Well, in a nutshell, body knowing is the nemesis of patriarchy. Period.
Yes.
And you've been described. Yes. Yeah. And so this brings us to the question of, okay, what is the relationship between spirituality and politics? And Charlene Spretnick put together an incredible anthology back in the early 90s, The Politics of Women's Spirituality, and that was the other book that spun my head around. Even though I've been on the path for several years, that was like, whoa, really cinched it. And what I've come to understand since is that, politics, spirituality trumps politics. Politics emerges out of spirituality. Spirituality is, the story we tell ourselves about what is our relationship to the cosmos, what is our relationship to the earth, what is our relationship to each other, what are our values in daily life, what are our relationships. And so out of that, so in patriarchy, you have, spirit and flesh are separate. Male is dominant, and God is male. And of course, it had to be, because you can't separate women unless you make God male. And so that isolation and separation is the foundation of patriarchy and domination over. And everything else is, the earth is dead, the rocks are dead, trees are just trees, and so forth. Everything's half dead, or fully dead. And so so for women's spirituality to reemerge as it is, it will change politics utterly. It will change because it's a different relationship to life, and it's in alignment with the indigenous wisdom and knowledge. I have an incredible inspiration and have incredible respect for the Native American tribes here in the United States who have come together at Standing Rock. Many of them were at war with each other, or hostile toward each other for many decades, and they came together across those divisions to stand for the earth, to stop the black serpent, which is what their prophecy is about this pipeline. It's a prophecy fulfilled, and they're fighting it. And they've held that knowledge and that respect, relationship of all, for the earth, and are being just a part of the web. They've held that in spite of centuries of genocide. And so have women, ultimately. What happened in 2017, the day after number 45 president was elected, the march, the plans for the march. I'm going to put us on gallery view here, because I feel like we're having such a wonderful conversation, the two of us. And what happened is that something deep in women, the real spiritual base, women need to be respected. And there's a pussy grabber in the White House, and it went from a march on Washington to a global march, spontaneously global. Right. And so that's women's spirituality. The respect of the body, the respect of woman. So something was tapped in that goes beyond the jargon, beyond the you believe in this, you believe in that, and they've also shown, Ruth, that a study shows that by the time you have 20% number of women, 20% women in a legislative body, the decisions qualitatively change. And that is women's collective consciousness. Yes. And that's what you and I work with when we work in rituals with women. It's a collective consciousness of the female. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is what was sparked in that 2017 march, and is still being sparked. And that's what we need. And that's what the women who are running, who saved Ireland from the banks and all that stuff. The women that are running Ireland, you see them in Michael Moore's movie, Where Do We Invade Next? And he interviews them, and they're talking about how, well, look, there's 4 women or 5 women sitting there. Look, when women rule, we include everyone. We include
everybody.
Take care.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely, because whether you're a physical mother, we have the capacity to be mothers. And I think, a woman I used to know used to describe the word mother as me plus other is mother.
Oh, I like that.
And I love that. I love that, because that is, we women include more than just us in our bodies. So we embody that concept of more than just ourselves.
We're built around it. We're built around the womb, right?
Yeah, we are. We're built for it.
And I want to go back to. I want to go back to the portal, which of course is what the womb is. And when you said my work sounds like a portal, that it's a sound portal into the other dimensions. And a woman's body is a portal. We know that. And I've
Yes.
never been a mother. I've never been pregnant. And I never particularly wanted to have children. I didn't dream about it. I didn't dream about getting married and having a wedding and all that stuff. And if I'd had a mate at the right time in my life, I probably would have had children. But I feel like a mother. I know you're a mother,
Yeah.
a literal
Yeah.
mother. And I feel that motherly love, especially now
Yes.
that what's happening right now is with the separating. This will be dated, but I'm going to say it. They're separating the migrant children from the mothers and fathers at the border here, and it's gut wrenching. And people are rising up, and
Yes.
you know
Yes.
the
You
mothers.
have all these first ladies that are still alive, all, and they're mothers. I mean,
Yeah,
this is what you're talking about. There are things that connect us beyond political affiliation. There
yeah,
are certain basic things, and that has to do with protecting our children. And we are lionesses. The most fierce animals on the planet are mothers.
yes. And I would point people to the story of Lemabawi in Liberia, where the women ended the brutal child soldier, fresh heads on the stakes every morning in the marketplace, civil war in Liberia, and the women ended it. They came across the barriers of Muslim and Christian, and the inspiration was a prayer that Lema Bowie got that says, "Pray, get the women together and pray and chant for peace." And she thought, well, what a silly dream is that? And who's going to? Well, she ended up having to do it, and the what kept the women going through those 3 years of demanding that there be peace talks was their spiritual foundation, their singing and chanting and their prayers. And that's what I really wanted to
Yes.
bring through in this interview. It's been really weighing on me that feminism will fail without the spiritual foundation. Now, this politics and spirituality, when the women's spirituality emerged out of the second wave of women's feminism, women's liberation, a lot of criticism happened. Well, that's not important, and that's digression, and that's essentialism, or that's this or that. But it's actually the foundation. The core emerged out of the second wave, I believe. And the core is that we must have a spiritual foundation. Whether you believe in
Yes.
the goddess, or whether you believe in this, that, whether you're a Buddhist, or whether you're, anyway, it's to believe in the basic respect for woman and life, and that we are mothers. We are
Right.
mothers. And so in Liberia, they came across that barrier between the Muslim and Christians by recognizing that we have to do this because we're mothers. We're doing this for the children.
Yes.
That's what they
Yes.
did. And we have to have this spiritual, that is spiritual. There's nothing more spiritual
Yes.
than mother and child.
Yes. Absolutely. Every one of us is a child of a mother. No one escapes that. Everyone does. My goddess did give birth to your God. I mean, hello. I mean, there it is.
There it
We
is.
all have a mother. We all have a mother source. The planets do too.
Yeah, yeah,
It is a primal thing.
yeah. And the attempt now to erase the female, to blur the lines between male and female, and the reality of biology and the sacredness of the
Yes.
womb is evil. And
It's absolutely crazy, and and as you know, we both agree that that this latest thing going on around gender identity, supplanting or erasing biology, is just in a continuum that began thousands of years ago, with the erasure of women and the enslavement of women and all of that over time from the earlier goddess-centered, female-centered cultures.
yeah, which were inclusive of all, and true
Yes.
inclusion. And then of course we know too that, I'm going to throw this in there, I'm going to throw it in, that transhumanism is fueling this. a desire to completely transcend biology, to eradicate fleshism as another ism, and to
Wow.
cyborg the body and upload our consciousness into computers. This is highly funded. This is a trajectory that is really happening, and that's why the wisdom of women, the wisdom of this women's spirituality movement is so important. You know, it's if we stop and we feel into the body and we feel into the heart, we know that we are a part of the sacred weave of life. We know that the body is sacred. We've barely begun to tap into the wisdom and powers of the body. We don't need computers. We haven't
Right.
begun to realize the full potential of our physical reality, the treasure of the human body. Yeah, that's what I...
And how dangerous is it to the powers that be to have power sourced from what you've been sharing in this hour?
Yeah.
You know, and how different is that? And the transhuman, I've never heard the term fleshism. Is that must be a
It's out there.
thing in
Yep.
transhumanism?
Yep, it's out there.
Wow.
The time will come,
Wow.
fleshism will be considered just another ism, another racism. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. How
I'm trying to
arrogant.
get my mind around.
I know.
Wow. I'm trying to get wow.
I
Wow.
know.
So, wow.
Wow.
So is there is there any are there any other things that you would like to say to the people that are listening to this interview? Any things you really want them to know?
I would just go back to stop, go into nature, or go just into your own body. Just stop and listen and let yourself feel. Because the body doesn't lie. The body will guide us. The body and the heart, they're inseparable. This is all, and the body is sacred, and woman is sacred. And the wisdom that came through in the 70s and 80s through the women's spirituality movement is very much alive today. It's like a hidden stream. The lineage of woman is a hidden stream. It's just below the surface. It's been there since patriarchy began. And all we have to do is just drop down. Just drop down into it. And we know what we know. We just need to let ourselves feel it. Those are my final words.
Well, thank you so much. It has truly been an honor to have this conversation with you and to hear more about your work, and knowing that you're sharing it with everyone who is getting to see you and to hear you. And I am just so deeply honored to know you, and thank you.
I thank you, Ruth, for doing this interview. My pleasure. Absolutely. Bye, everybody, for now.